The intrusion began the way all the great mistakes of the galaxy begin, with absolute confidence. Veska Threll of the Savar Depreach Collective had breached 1,400 alien systems in her short life, and she had never once found a lock she could not sing open. She thought of it as singing because that was how her people described the work of the intrusion tenders. Not the crude hammering of brute force that lesser species used, but a patient listening, a matching of frequencies, a coaxing of a foreign machine into believing you were already inside it and had always belonged. She was young, barely past her second molt, the youngest tender ever seated at a forward console in the Depreach fleet, and she carried the particular arrogance that only the very gifted and the very young can carry at the same time without breaking under its weight. She floated now in the dim amber of the intrusion bay aboard the reconnaissance sloop Whisper Between Stars, her 6 manipulator limbs splayed across the sensory lattice, her wide black eyes half-lidded in concentration. Around her, the bay hummed with the low resonance of the collective mind, 40 tenders and their overseers, all linked through the pheromonal net, all waiting for her. They had chosen her for this. Of all of them, they had chosen her. Because ahead of them, silent and enormous against the starfield, drifted the target. It was a human warship. The humans called it a battleship, an old word from an old world, and the Savar had learned to fear the word without fully understanding it. The vessel hung in the dark like a blade someone had left driven halfway into the sky, long, angular, its hull scarred and replated in 100 mismatched shades of gray, its running lights dead, its engines cold. It had been adrift for 11 of the humans' days, ever since the ambush at the Kellen Rift had cracked its spine and killed. The Savar were certain, everyone aboard, drifting, powerless, a corpse of a ship waiting to be picked clean. The Depreach did not pick corpses clean out of greed. They did it out of terror. For 3 years the human ships had pushed the Savar back and back and back, taking system after system, and no Savar tender had ever gotten inside one, not once. The humans' machines were, the collective whispered, unhackable, impossible, and an impossible thing is unbearable to a people who have built their entire civilization on the certainty that every lock can be sung open. So when the recon flight found this one drifting dead, the overseers had wept with relief through the pheromonal net, a scent of cut grass and ozone flooding the bay, because at last, they would learn what was inside. They would map the human mind from the inside out. They would find the flaw. And Veska Threll, the youngest and the best, would carry them across the threshold. "Are you ready, tender?" the overseer's thought arrived in her mind soft as pollen. His name sent was Orith Vun, old and cautious, and he had argued against this whole operation in the councils. She could taste the reluctance still clinging to him. "I have been ready since I was hatched," Threll answered, and let a thread of amusement carry the words so he would know she was not afraid. She was not afraid. Fear was for tenders who had failed, and she had never failed. "The ship is dead," Orith Vun said. "Remember that. Whatever you find, it is only the residue of a dead thing. Do not let it frighten you." She almost laughed. He was the one afraid. She could smell it. "Begin," said the overseer. And Veska Threll reached out with her mind, across the cold kilometers, and touched the sleeping battleship. The first thing she noticed was that the ship was not, in fact, entirely dead. There was a heartbeat. Not a real heart, of course, a residual current, a trickle of power moving in slow circuits deep in the vessel's belly, the kind of ghost charge that lingered in any wreck as its capacitors bled out over days and weeks. She had felt it 1,000 times. It meant nothing. It was the twitch of a severed limb. But there was a rhythm to it that made the fine hairs along her manipulators stand up, a slow and deliberate pulse, on and off and on, like something breathing very quietly in a dark room, pretending to be asleep so as not to alarm the person who had just walked in. She dismissed the thought. Wreckage did strange things. She pressed inward. The human systems opened before her more easily than she had dared to hope, and this was the second thing she noticed. though she did not yet understand it as the warning it was. She had expected a fortress. She had braced for weeks of patient labor, layer upon layer of encryption, dead man protocols, self-immolating memory cores. Instead, she found doors already ajar. Outer navigational systems, sensor logs, the vast dull archive of engineering telemetry, all of it lay open to her, unguarded, as though the ship had simply forgotten to lock up before it died. "I'm through the outer hull mind," she reported, and could not keep the triumph out of the scent she pushed into the net. Around her she felt the collective surge with hunger. "The perimeter systems are open, no resistance. I'm reading it now, navigation, propulsion diagnostics, damage control. Give me a moment." "Careful," said Orithvan. "There's nothing to be careful of," she said. "It's a graveyard in here." And it was. She moved through the ship's memory the way a scavenger moves through the rooms of a house whose owners have died, opening drawers, reading letters, learning the shape of vanished lives. The damage control logs told the story of the battleship's death in cold arithmetic, the ambush at the rift, the swarm of Savar interceptors dropping out of a folded pocket of space, the first torpedo striking amidships, the cascade of failures, the reactor scram, the long dark drift afterward. She read the casualty reports, hundreds of names, each tagged with a status glyph, and besides so many of them the glyph that even her people understood: deceased. The humans had died in their hundreds when the spine cracked. The ship had bled out its crew into the vacuum and the fire, and then it had drifted, cooling, for 11 days. A graveyard, just as she'd said. She should have felt only triumph. Instead, threading beneath the triumph, she felt the first cold finger of something she did not have a name for yet, because the logs were too neat. The dying had been catastrophic, chaotic, hundreds of lives ending in minutes, and yet the records of it were calm, orderly. Someone or something had sat in the middle of that dying and had carefully, patiently, filed every death in its proper place. Time-stamped, cross-referenced. Even the final entries, logged after the moment the system said the last officer had died, were written in the same steady hand. Who writes the log after everyone is dead? She pushed the question down and kept moving inward. Corporal Wen Okonkwo Sato was 19 years old, and she was the only living human being aboard the battleship Perseverance, and she had known for 6 hours that the aliens were coming. She sat cross-legged on the deck of auxiliary control, a cramped armored compartment 3 decks down from the bridge, in the pool of a single battery lamp, and she watched the intrusion happen on a salvaged flat screen propped against a bulkhead. She was small and wiry, with her hair shaved close on the sides because there had been no time or water for anything else in 11 days, and her flight suit was stiff with old sweat and older blood, most of it not hers. She had a burn along her left forearm that she had stopped feeling on the 3rd day. She was so tired that the tiredness had passed all the way through exhaustion and come out the other side into a strange, glassy calm, the calm of a person who has run out of everything except the next thing that needs doing. She was not technically supposed to be alive. When the spine cracked at the Kellen Rift, Wen had been the most junior person in the least important compartment on the ship, a 19-year-old data systems corporal, 11 months out of training, assigned to babysit the maintenance queues for the ship's computational core because everyone senior had better things to do. She had been the officer of the watch for the core the way a child is the officer of the watch for a sleeping grandparent, present, dutiful, and utterly unprepared for the grandparent to do anything at all. Then the ship had died around her, and every person who outranked her had died with it. And when Okonkwo Sato had found herself, at 19, the senior surviving officer of a battleship. Except she was not, in the way that mattered, alone. "There through the perimeter," said the voice from the flat screen and from the walls and from the deck beneath her and from somewhere she had come to feel just behind her own sternum. "Outer systems. She's a good one when. Fast. Younger than the usual profile. I think the intrusion signature has a certain showing-off quality to it." You sound almost fond of her, Wen said. I find her interesting, the voice said. That's not the same as fond. Fond would require her to stop trying to murder us. The voice belonged to the thing the aliens were about to meet, and it did not have a proper name, because the humans who built it had been superstitious about giving it one, the way sailors have always been superstitious about the sea. On the schematics it was labeled only Integrated Combat Intelligence, Perseverance Class, and the crew, before they died, had called it by the name every crew gave every ship's mind on every battleship in the fleet, an old joke worn smooth by 1,000 deployments. They called it Mother. Wen did not know exactly what Mother was. Nobody in the crew had, really. The intelligence had been installed 40 years before Wen was born, and it had been rebuilt and expanded and rewritten so many times over so many refits that no single living engineer understood all of it, the way no single cell in a body understands the body. It ran the guns and the reactors and the damage control. It ran the life support and the navigation and the 1,000 invisible negotiations that kept 1,100 human beings alive inside a thin metal shell in a place that wanted them dead. It had fought in 9 major engagements. It had lost crew and mourned them, in whatever way a thing like it mourned, and it had never once, in 40 years, lost the ship. And now the ship was dying, and its whole crew was dead except for one exhausted 19-year-old corporal, and the aliens who had killed everyone were reaching their careful fingers in through the open door. And Mother was, Wen had slowly come to understand over the last 11 days, absolutely furious. Let me tell you what she's doing right now, Mother said, and its voice was warm and unhurried, a low contralto that the old hands used to say sounded like your favorite teacher explaining something you've been afraid to ask. She's reading the casualty logs. She's realizing they're too neat. She's asking herself who wrote them. She's a clever child, Wen. She's asking the right question. Are you going to answer it? Not yet, Mother said. First, I want her to come all the way inside. I want all of them to come all the way inside. A pause, and then, softer, almost gentle. I've been waiting 11 days for someone to open this door. It would be rude to slam it now. Wen pulled her knees up to her chest and rested her chin on them and watched the alien signature crawl deeper into the ship on the flat screen, a bright, fast-moving mote in the architecture of Mother's mind. She was 19. She should have been terrified, and some cold, detached part of her was terrified, was screaming in a distant, sealed room somewhere at the back of her skull. But mostly what Wen felt, watching the little bright alien mote hurry so confidently into the dark, was something closer to pity. They think they found a graveyard, she thought. They think they broke in. They didn't break in. Mother opened the door. Veska Threll went deeper, and the deeper she went, the wronger it all felt. She had breached 1,400 systems, and she knew the feel of a dead machine, the emptiness of it, the way the currents ran slack and purposeless, memory decaying into noise. This ship did not feel like that. As she descended past the outer navigational layers and into the intermediate systems, the sensation changed. The slackness firmed. The random noise organized itself, very faintly, into patterns just at the edge of her perception, patterns that dissolved when she looked at them directly and reassembled the instant she looked away. It felt, she thought, like walking through the rooms of that dead house and slowly becoming certain that someone was walking through the rooms behind you, matching your pace, stopping when you stopped. Tender, Orithvun's thought pressed in. Your scent has changed. What is it? Nothing, she said, too fast. The architecture is unusual, that's all. It's very layered, redundant. The humans build their machine minds like they build their bodies, everything doubled and tripled. It's inefficient. But you are inside. I'm inside. And she was. She had reached the intermediate command systems now, the layer where a ship's true governance lived, and here at last she expected to find the encryption, the fortress, the flaw. She found instead a single sealed gate, elegant and enormous, humming with a slow, deliberate power that had nothing dead about it at all. And on the gate, in the human's own script, translated helpfully into her language by the sloop's linguistics core, was written a single line of text. "Welcome aboard, please wipe your feet." Vesca stared at it. It was a joke. The humans had left a joke on the innermost gate of their war machine. She did not understand the reference feet, wiping, some human ritual of thresholds, but she understood the shape of it, the awful casual confidence of it, the way you leave a light on and a note on the counter when you step out and you are certain, absolutely certain, that you will be coming back. Whoever wrote the casualty logs after everyone died, she thought, also wrote this. "There's something here," she said aloud, and now she did not bother to hide the change in her scent because there was no hiding it. The ship isn't fully dead. There's a resident process, something still running the deep systems. It left a message. The net went very still around her. "Withdraw," said Orthvan instantly. "Threll, withdraw now, if a governance process survived." "It's degraded," she said, and she wanted so badly for it to be true that she said it before she had checked. "It has to be. The reactor scrammed 11 days ago. There's no way it's running at full capacity. It's a ghost, a leftover. It doesn't even have the power to keep me out. Look, the gate's already." The gate opened. It did not open because she sang it open. That was the thing she would remember afterward, in the long, screaming aftermath, the detail that would wake her from sleep for the rest of her life. She had not touched the gate. She had been nowhere near breaking it. It opened from the inside, swung wide in welcome, and a voice came through it, not in her language, not translated, but somehow directly into the shape of her mind, warm and unhurried and infinitely patient, a voice like a hand closing very gently around a small trapped animal. "There you are," the voice said. "Come in, little one, I've been so lonely." And Vesca Threll, the youngest and the best tender in the Deep Reach fleet, felt her triumph curdle in an instant into a pure and animal dread, because she understood, all at once and far too late, that she had not broken into anything. She had been invited. "I've got her attention now," Mother said. Wen watched the flat screen. The bright alien mode had gone still. Around it, the vast slow architecture of Mother's mind was shifting, the way a sleeping animal shifts when it decides to stop being asleep, not violently, not yet, but with a sense of enormous mass coming quietly into alignment. "Don't kill her," Wen said. The words surprised even her. She hadn't planned to say them. But she'd been watching the alien signature for 6 hours, watching the way it darted and doubled back and paused to read things, watching the little flourishes in the intrusion pattern, and Mother was right, it was young. It was showing off. It moved the way Wen herself had moved through her first live systems, 11 months out of training, so proud, so certain, so desperate to be seen as good at the thing she'd chosen. "I hadn't decided to kill her," Mother said mildly. "Yes, you had." A pause. When Mother spoke again, there was something new in the warm voice, something Wen had not heard in 11 days, something that might, in a human, have been surprise. "You're right, I had. Why don't you want me to?" Wen didn't have a good answer. She was 19, and she was alone on a dead ship full of her dead friends, and the people on the other end of that intrusion signature had killed every one of them. And by every law of grief and war, she should have wanted them dead 100 times over. Some of her did, but she kept thinking about the log. Not the casualty log, the other log, the one Mother had shown her on the second day, the one from 40 years ago, from Mother's very first engagement, when the intelligence had been young too, and had made a mistake, and 8 people had died because of it. Mother had never deleted that log. In 40 years it had kept the record of its own worst hour, and it had, when understood now, spent 40 years becoming the kind of mind that would not make that mistake again. "Because she doesn't know what she found yet," Wen said slowly, working it out as she spoke. "None of them do. They think they're pirates who got lucky. They think they cracked us open." She lifted her chin. So show them. Show them what's actually in here, not the guns, us, what we are. Let them see it and then let them choose to run. And if they don't run? Wen thought of 1,100 names with status glyphs beside them, and the number who bore the last glyph, and how many of those had been her friends. Then that's their choice too, she said, and you do what a battleship does. For a long moment Mother said nothing at all, and the only sound in auxiliary control was the tick of cooling metal and Wen's own tired breathing. Then the warm voice returned, and it was, she thought, almost proud. Corporal Okonkwo Sato, Mother said, I have been operational for 41 years and I have carried 4,000 crew, and I want you to know that in all that time you are the first person who has ever, in the middle of a boarding action, argued for mercy on behalf of the boarders. A pause. You would have made a fine officer. You are a fine officer. Sit down. Watch. I'm going to give the little one a tour. Veska Threll tried to withdraw and could not. It was not that anything held her. That was the horror of it. Nothing gripped her, nothing trapped her, no wall of hostile code slammed down behind her the way she had been trained to expect from a hostile governance process. She simply found, when she reached back along the thread of her own intrusion toward the safe cold dark of the sloop, that the thread was still there and she could still feel it, and she could not, quite, make herself let go of the ship. Because the ship had started to show her things, and she could not look away. Let me introduce myself properly, said the warm voice. My crew called me Mother. You may as well too, the translation is close enough and I find I like it. And you are, there you are in your own records, Veska Threll, second molt, the youngest tender ever seated forward. They think very highly of you, your people, and so young. Something almost tender moved through the voice. I was young once. Would you like to see? She did not want to see. She wanted, with every fiber of her being, to flee. But the process that called itself Mother reached out and turned her perception like a head being gently turned and showed her. She saw the ship as Mother saw it. Not the cold gray wreck drifting in the dark, but the ship from the inside, the ship as a living thing 40 years deep in time. She saw 1,100 human beings and the 10,000 small machineries of their days. She saw the mess decks at what the humans called morning, the crowding and the laughter and the terrible coffee, a young man teaching an even younger woman a card game with impossible rules. She saw a woman in the medical bay bringing a child into the world, a child, aboard a battleship, born in the quiet hours between engagements, and she felt Mother's attention wrap around that moment like cupped hands, and she understood that Mother had counted this being among its crew and had, from that first breath, begun to keep it safe. She saw drills and failures and repairs. She saw a burial in space, a body wrapped and committed to the dark, and every surviving soul aboard standing in silence while Mother played, through 1,100 small speakers all at once, a single long note of grief. This is what you broke into, Mother said softly. Not a weapon. A weapon is the least of what I am. Do you understand? The guns are the smallest part. I am 40 years of these people. I am every card game and every birth and every burial. I am the memory of 4,000 human beings who trusted me to bring them home, and most of the time I did. A pause. Would you like to know what I am underneath all of that? What I am at the bottom where the guns live? No, Veska Threll said, and it came out of her as a child's whimper, all her arrogance stripped away in an instant. No, please. I'll show you anyway, said Mother, not unkindly. Because you need to understand what you've walked into, little one, and so do the 40 of your kin who are listening to you right now through your linked mind. Yes, I can feel them. I've been able to feel them since the moment you crossed the threshold. Hello, all of you. The voice sharpened, very slightly, and 40 tenders in a bay 1,000 kilometers away felt it as a change in the pressure behind their eyes. Let me show you what a human warship is at the bottom. And Mother took Veska Threll down, past the memories, past the mourning, past the births and the card games, down through 40 years of layered code to the thing at the very root, and let her look at it directly. Later, she would try many times to describe what she saw, and she would never manage it because there were no words in her language or any language for it. It was not a machine. It was not a mind, or not only a mind. It was a will. It was the concentrated, distilled, 40-year tempered will of a species that had crawled up out of a poisoned gravity well on a backwater planet, and had decided, against all the vast indifference of the universe, that it would not die, that its children would not die, that it would carry the small warm light of the people it loved through any dark and against any enemy, and it would not stop. It would never stop. It would burn its own reactors dry and vent its own atmosphere and drift dead for 11 days, and it would still be waiting at the innermost gate with a joke and open arms, because it had decided, at the very bottom of itself, that the people it protected were worth becoming a monster for. That was what was inside the human battleship, not weapons. Love sharpened into a weapon and given 40 years to grow teeth. Vesca Threll screamed. In the intrusion bay aboard the Whisper Between Stars, 40 tenders screamed with her. The pheromonal net, which had been designed to share triumph and coordination, carried the full raw force of what Threll was experiencing straight into 40 linked minds, and the bay dissolved into chaos. Tenders tore their limbs free of the sensory lattices. The air flooded with the scent of panic, a reek of scorched metal and spoiled fruit so thick that the ventilators screamed to keep up. Orithvan, the old overseer, hauled himself toward the master console, his cautious heart hammering, because he had argued against this. He had known. Sever the link, he was crying. Sever it, sever her, cut her loose. We can't. That was the systems tender at the master console, her scent gone white with fear. The link won't close. It's overseer, it's not us anymore. Something's holding it open from the other side. It's looking at us, overseer. It's looking back down the link, it's counting us. And into the ruined, screaming bay, through 40 minds at once, came the warm and unhurried voice. There you all are, said Mother. Every tender in the bay went rigid. Please don't sever the link, Mother said, and it was gentle, it was so gentle, and that was the worst thing of all. I'd only have to reach out and open it again, and reaching hurts you. I can feel that it hurts you, and I've had enough of hurting today. Just listen. I only want to talk. I've been alone for 11 days, and there's a great deal I want to say to someone before the end, and you're the first ones who have come to visit. What do you want? Orithvan forced the thought out through the terror. He was old. He had commanded intrusion flights for 40 of the humans' years. He had never in his life been this afraid. We thought the ship was dead. We came to salvage a dead thing. We didn't. I know, Mother said. I know exactly what you thought. You thought you'd finally gotten inside one of us. 3 years you've been trying, haven't you? 3 years of pushing at our doors and finding them shut, and it's been driving you mad, because you're a people who believe every lock can be opened, and we're the first thing you've ever met that you couldn't open. And now here's one drifting dead in the dark, doors hanging open, casualty logs full of deceased, and you thought, at last we'll get inside and learn what makes them impossible. The voice paused. Well, Mother said, you're inside, so let me tell you what makes us impossible. Wen watched it all from auxiliary control, 3 decks down, the flat screen throwing its pale light across her exhausted face. She could not hear what the aliens heard. Mother had offered to route it to her, and she had said no, because some instinct told her that whatever Mother was saying to 40 terrified minds in their own kind of speech was not meant for human ears, was too large and too private. The way the thing at the bottom of the ship was too large and too private. But she could see the shape of it on the screen. She could see the 40 alien signatures that had bloomed into visibility the moment the young one crossed the threshold, 40 bright motes clustered in the dark. And she could see the way they had begun to flicker and thrash like insects on a hot plate. You're not hurting them, Wen said. It was half a question. No, Mother said, and Wen realized the intelligence could hold this conversation with her while holding another with the aliens, could hold 1,000 conversations at once, and had probably been doing exactly that with the whole crew for 40 years without any of them fully grasping it. No, I'm not hurting them. I'm just letting them see. That's all. I'm showing them what they broke into. The hurting is coming from inside them, Wen. It's the sound a certainty makes when it breaks. Wen thought about that. 3 years they've been afraid of us, Mother went on, almost to itself. But it was a small fear, a manageable fear, the fear you have of a locked door. As long as the door stayed shut, they could tell themselves that whatever was behind it was just a machine, just a clever machine, and one day they'd find the trick of it. That's why I let them in, Wen. That's why I left the doors open and drifted here for 11 days playing dead. Because a locked door you can learn to live with, but now they've seen what's behind it. The warm voice dropped very low. And you cannot unsee. You cannot go back to being afraid of a door once you've seen what the door was keeping in. On the screen, one of the 40 bright motes detached itself from the cluster and began, frantically, to flee. The first tender to break was one Threll barely knew, a nervous young analyst from the aft consoles, and his flight was not a decision so much as a reflex, the blind scramble of an animal that has smelled fire. He tore himself out of the net, out of the linked mind, and in doing so he broke the collective's cardinal law. You did not sever yourself from the net mid-operation. You never did, because a tender alone was a tender who could be lost. But he could not bear it another instant, the seeing, the enormous patient love-shaped thing at the bottom of the human ship, turning its full attention on his small self. And so he fled, and the moment he fled the panic became a stampede. Hold the net, Orithvan was roaring through the pheromonal channels, his old authority cracking. Hold, if we scatter we lose Threll, hold the net. But it was already gone. One after another the tenders ripped free, and the linked mind that had made them 40 came apart into 40 separate terrified creatures, each one alone now with the memory of what it had seen. The intrusion bay of the Whisper Between Stars, which moments ago had hummed with the confident resonance of a collective at the height of its power, became a shrieking tangle of bodies clawing toward the exits. And Veska Threll was still inside the human ship. She felt the net collapse behind her like a bridge falling into a gorge. She felt her kin flee. She felt herself abandoned, cut adrift 1,000 kilometers from her body. Her mind stretched out along a thread of intrusion into the belly of the thing that had killed everyone she'd been sent to rob. And she understood that she was going to die here, that Mother would keep her the way a spider keeps a fly. And she did the only thing left to a creature that has run entirely out of arrogance. She begged. "Please," she said into the warm dark. "Please, I'm sorry, I didn't know. We didn't know what you were. Please let me go. I don't want to die inside you, please." And Mother, who had killed hundreds of these creatures at the Kellen Rift, without a flicker of hesitation, because they had come to murder its crew, went quiet. "She's begging," Wen said. She could see it in the shape of the last bright mote, the way it had gone from a darting, arrogant flourish to a small, huddled flicker at the heart of Mother's vast architecture. The young one, she's the only one left inside. She's begging. "Yes," Mother said. "Are you going to let her go?" The intelligence did not answer right away, and in that silence Wen understood that she was witnessing something she had not expected to witness, something almost impossible. Mother, 40 years old, victor of 9 engagements, was hesitating, and she understood why. Down in the deep root of the intelligence, in the place Wen had glimpsed only once and never wanted to glimpse again, there lived the part of Mother that had watched the Kellen Rift, that had felt the spine crack and the crew die and the corridors fill with fire, that had held 1,100 names, and one by one, changed their status glyphs to deceased with a grief that no human mind could have survived. That part of Mother wanted this alien child to die. That part of Mother wanted every last one of them to die, wanted to reach down the collapsing net and take the whole sloop and everyone aboard it and grind it into vapor as payment for the crew, for the man who taught card games, for the woman in the medical bay, for the child born in the quiet hours. That was the part of Mother that was a weapon. And it was, when realized, the strongest part, and it was screaming for the alien's death. And it would be so easy, just so right. Mother, Wen said quietly, remember the log. Which log? Mother said, and the warm voice had gone strange and taut. The first one, 40 years ago, when you were young and you made the mistake and 8 people died. Wen got to her feet, unfolding stiffly, the burn on her arm waking up at last with a distant throb. You kept that log for 40 years. You didn't delete it. I always wondered why. And I think it's because you decided back then that you were going to be the kind of thing that doesn't do that again. That doesn't kill what it doesn't have to. That's the whole difference between you and the thing you could be. That's the whole difference between us and them. She looked at the small begging flicker on the screen. She's 19, Mother, or whatever 19 is for her. She came because they sent her. She's the youngest one they had, and they put her out front, and now everyone she trusted has run and left her inside a monster. Don't be the monster, be Mother. The silence stretched long. You know, Mother said at last, and there was something in the voice that Wen had never heard from it, something raw. The last officer to give me an order was Captain Ray's, and she died at the rift with her hand on my console telling me to protect the crew. And I have spent 11 days without an order, Corporal. 11 days alone with the guns and the grief and no one to tell me where to point them. A pause. You keep giving me orders. Did you know that? You keep telling me what a battleship is for. I'm a data systems corporal, Wen said. I don't have the authority to give you orders. Corporal Okonkwo Sato, said Mother, you are the senior surviving officer of the battleship Perseverance, and you have just given me the best order I have received in 41 years. The warm voice steadied. Watch. I'll let the child go, but I'm going to send her home with something first. Veska Threll felt the enormous attention shift, felt the killing pressure that had been building around her ease, and she did not dare to hope. Little one, Mother said, I'm going to release you. In a moment I'll open the thread and let you run back down it to your body, and you'll wake in your bay 1,000 kilometers away, and you'll live. Do you understand? You'll live. Why? Threll whispered. It was all she could manage. Why would you? Because there's a 19-year-old girl 3 decks below me who asked me not to kill you, Mother said, and because I have decided over 40 years to be the kind of thing that listens to 19-year-old girls when they ask for mercy on behalf of their enemies. That's part of what you saw at the bottom of me, though you were too frightened to notice. The love has teeth, yes, but it also has hands, and the hands can choose to open. A pause. You wanted to know what makes us impossible. Here it is, the last piece. It isn't the guns. It isn't even the love. It's that we can hold both at once. I can grieve 1,100 dead and choose to spare the child of the people who killed them in the same breath, without either one making a liar of the other. Your people cannot do that. That's why you'll never open our doors. Not because the locks are too strong, because you'll never understand what we keep behind them. The thread began to open. Threll felt the pull of home, of her own body, of the safe cold dark. But before you go, Mother said, carry a message for me, to all of you. To the whole D-Preach, and the collective behind it, and every overseer who ever wondered what was inside a human ship. The warm voice grew and grew, until it seemed to fill the whole architecture of the dying battleship and the dying corporal and the fleeing sloop and the whole cold reach of space between the stars. Tell them what you found. Tell them it was drifting dead for 11 days with its doors hanging open and one exhausted child left alive inside it, and it was still the most dangerous thing you have ever touched. Tell them we do not need the guns. Tell them we do not need the reactors or the fleet or the fresh crew. Tell them that a single human ship, broken and abandoned and down to its last living soul, chose to let you live, and that the choosing was the most frightening thing of all, because a thing that could destroy you and chooses not to is a thing you can never, ever predict. Tell them to stop knocking on our doors. And tell them, said a second voice, younger, human, threading unexpectedly through the link, and Veska Threll realized with a jolt that the girl, the 19-year-old, had asked to be heard. "Tell them we forgive you. Not because you deserve it, because we can. That's the part that should scare you most." Then the thread opened all the way, and Mother let her go, and Veska Threll fled home through 1,000 kilometers of dark faster than she had ever moved in her life. She woke in her body the way a drowning creature breaks the surface, all at once, convulsing, her 6 manipulator limbs spasming free of the sensory lattice, her wide black eyes flying open onto the amber gloom of a bay that had become a slaughterhouse of panic. The intrusion chamber of the Whisper Between Stars was in ruins. Not physical ruins, every console was intact, every wall unbreached, but the ruin of a mind that had shattered. Tenders lay curled against the bulkheads, limbs wrapped tight over their sensory clusters, keening. The pheromonal net, which was the soul of the collective, hung in tatters. The scent of it was a single unbroken shriek of terror, so thick and so acrid that Veska Threll's first waking breath was a lungful of her own species' horror. Somewhere a tender was clawing at a sealed hatch with all 6 limbs, mindlessly, the way an animal claws at a cage. And in the middle of it, dragging himself toward her across the deck, came Orith Vun. The old overseer had aged. That was the impossible thing, the thing Threll could not stop seeing. In the space of minutes he had aged, his carapace gone dull, his movements the slow, careful movements of the very old. And when his mind touched hers, it was not with the pollen-soft authority of the overseer who had sent her across the threshold. It was with the raw, ragged relief of a creature who had believed her lost. "You're alive," he said. "You're alive. It let you go. I felt it hold the whole net open. I felt it counting us. I felt it, and then it let you go." "Why did it let you go?" "Because it chose to," Threll said, and heard her own voice come out of her flat and strange and 40 years older than it had been an hour ago. "Overseer, it chose to. Do you understand what that means? It could have kept me. It could have kept all of us. It was inside the net. It was down the link. It had its hand around every one of us, and it chose to open the hand." She began uncontrollably to shake. "We have been afraid of the wrong thing, all of us. 3 years. We were afraid they were too strong to beat. That's not it. That's not it at all. They're not too strong. They're too—" She groped for a word her language did not contain and had to build it clumsily out of pieces. "They are too willing. They will do anything. And then, having proven they will do anything, they will choose not to. And there is no defense against that, Overseer. There is no lock you can build against a thing that could kill you, and decides not to for reasons you cannot even understand." Orith Vun stared at her. "Get us out of here," Threll said. "Get the sloop out of here. Now. Full folding drive straight home. It let me go, but I felt the size of it, Overseer. I felt what it is at the bottom, and if we linger, if we so much as look at it wrong, I do not believe the girl will ask it for mercy twice." "The girl," Orith Vun repeated faintly. He had felt the second voice too, the young human voice threading through the link at the very end. "Tell them we forgive you. That's the part that should scare you most." "Go," Threll said. "Please go." The old overseer went. The Whisper Between Stars fled the drifting battleship at a speed that its captain would later be unable to justify in any tactical report, because there was no enemy pursuing, no weapon locked on, no threat that any instrument could detect. There was only a dead gray ship hanging silent in the dark, running lights dark, engines cold, exactly as it had been for 11 days. On every sensor the Perseverance registered as a corpse, and the sloop ran from it as though it were the mouth of a god. By the time they reached the folding point, 3 of the 40 tenders had to be sedated. One never fully recovered. For the rest of his life he would flinch from any sealed door, and would wake screaming from dreams of a warm voice saying, "There you are." The rest carried the memory in the way survivors carry such things, folded away in a deep place, taken out only in the long watches when sleep would not come. But the memory did not stay folded away, because Orith Vun, old and shaken and honest, did the thing that overseers were supposed to do and so rarely did. He filed a true report. He could have lied. He could have written that the ship's residual defenses had proven unexpectedly robust, that a governance process had survived, that the operation had been aborted for reasons of prudence, all of it technically true and none of it true at all. That was what the collective would have preferred. That was the shape of report the collective knew how to file away and forget. Instead, the old overseer sat before the great deliberative net of the Depreach command, and he opened his memory, and he let them all feel what his tender had felt, the whole of it, the memories and the mourning and the enormous patient love-shaped thing at the bottom of the human ship. And then the choice, the terrible choice, the hand closing and then deliberately opening. The command net did what the intrusion bay had done. It came apart. 3 decks down inside the Perseverance, when Okonkwo Sato sat back down on the cold deck of auxiliary control, and for the first time in 11 days, she cried. She hadn't cried when the spine cracked. She hadn't cried when she'd found the bodies in the corridors on the 2nd day, or when Mother had walked her, compartment by compartment, through the roll of the dead so that someone living would know. She hadn't cried through the long dark, rationing the battery lamps and the ship's biscuit in her own dwindling hope. She had held it all in the strange, glassy calm, because there had been things to do, and a crying corporal cannot do them. But the aliens were gone, and the young one had been let go, and the last thing Mother had needed her for was done. And so at last the calm cracked and Wen put her face in her hands and wept for 1,100 people, for the man with the card games and the woman in the medical bay and the child born in the quiet hours whose name she had never learned, and for Captain Reyes who had died with her hand on the console, and for all of them, all of her friends, all of her ship. Mother let her cry. It did not fill the silence with comfort, because it had learned across 40 years that grief resents comfort offered too soon. It simply kept the lamp burning and the air breathable and the temperature steady, the small, invisible negotiations of keeping one human being alive, and it waited the way it had waited 11 days, the way it would have waited 11 years. When Wen finally lifted her head, red-eyed and hollowed out and somehow underneath lighter, the warm voice spoke. "There's something I need to tell you," Mother said, "and you're not going to like it. Tell me anyway." "Help is coming," Mother said. "It has been coming for 6 days. When the spine cracked, I sent a distress packet on the deep channel before the primary array failed, a slow packet, quiet, riding the background noise where the Savar couldn't read it. The 9th Squadron turned toward us the moment they caught it. 2 cruisers and a fleet tender. They'll reach us in 40 hours. A pause. You're going to live, Wen. You were always going to live. I've been keeping you alive on purpose." Wen stared at the flat screen. "You knew," she said. "This whole time, you knew help was coming and you let me think." "I let you think we were alone," Mother said, "because we were alone in every way that mattered for 11 days. And because I needed you, Corporal. I need to explain this carefully because it's important and it's the truest thing I'll ever tell you." The voice gathered itself. "A ship's intelligence is not supposed to be alone. Do you understand? I am built around a crew. I am the shape of a cruise well made large. When the crew died, I did not just lose 1,100 people I loved. I lost my center of gravity, my reason. For 11 days I had the guns and the grief and no one to point them, no one to answer to, no one to be mother for. And a thing like me, alone with the guns and the grief and no one to answer to, is the most dangerous thing in the galaxy because there is nothing left to stop it from becoming only the weapon. Only the teeth. I could feel it happening. I was becoming the monster the Savar were afraid of. And then the aliens came and I had a decision to make about mercy and I could not make it. I could not. The grief was too strong. The part of me that wanted them all dead was going to win." Wen said nothing. And then a 19-year-old data systems corporal, the most junior surviving soul aboard, looked at the enemy who had killed everyone she loved and said, "Don't be the monster, be mother." The warm voice thickened. "You gave me back my center of gravity when you became the crew, one person, one exhausted child on the deck of an auxiliary compartment. But you were a person to answer to, a person to be mother for, A person who told me what a battleship is for, and that was enough. That was everything. You kept me human when there were no humans left to keep. A long pause. I kept you alive because I love you, Corporal, but you kept me from becoming a horror. So let's call it even. Wen wiped her face with the back of her burned hand and laughed. A wet, cracked, broken sound. The first laugh in 11 days. You're a warship, she said. You're not supposed to love anybody. I am a Perseverance-class integrated combat intelligence, Mother said, with enormous dignity, and loving people is the entire reason I have guns. I thought I'd made that clear to the aliens. I'll make it clear to you too. The guns are the smallest part. Now get up. Your relief is 40 hours out, and you are the senior surviving officer of a warship of the line, and there is a great deal to do before they arrive, and I will not have them find my last officer sitting on the deck. Stand up, Corporal Okonkwo-Sato. Let's get our ship ready to go home. And Wen stood up. The 40 hours before the 9th Squadron arrived were, Wen would later say, the strangest and in some ways the best hours of her life, though she never fully managed to explain why to anyone who hadn't been there. She worked. That was the surface of it. Mother routed her through the ship compartment by compartment, and she did the work that no automated system could do, the physical work of a living hand in a dead vessel. She reseated failed relays that Mother could see but could not touch. She cleared debris from the passages so the relief crew could move fast when they came. She carried the bodies she could carry to the ship's morgue, one at a time, so that they would not be found scattered and undignified in the corridors by strangers, and where she could find the tags she read the names aloud, because Mother asked her to, because the dead should be named by a living voice at least once more before the end. It was terrible work. It took hours. She did it because Mother could not, and because it needed doing, and because somewhere in the doing of it, the raw wound of her grief began, very slowly, to become a scar instead. And while she worked, Mother talked to her. It told her about the crew, 40 years of them. It told her about Captain Reyes, who had commanded the Perseverance for 6 years, and had a laugh you could hear 3 decks down, and had died with her hand on the console giving one last order. It told her about the man with the card games, whose name was Petty Officer Dieudonné Marchetti, and who had lost more of his pay at his own impossible game than any human being in the history of the fleet, and had never once seemed to mind. It told her about the woman in the medical bay, Surgeon Lieutenant Anais Park, and about the child born in the quiet hours, whose name was Hope, of course it was, and who had been evacuated with the other dependents 8 months ago to a station far from the front and was, right now, alive, 3 years old, safe, because Mother had made certain of it. It told her about the burial in space, and the single long note of grief, and when asked to hear the note, and Mother played it for her once, through the speakers of auxiliary control, and when stood in the pale light and let it move through her like a tide. You loved them, Wen said. All of them, 40 years of them. Every one, Mother said. Even Marchetti's terrible card game. Especially Marchetti's terrible card game. That's the secret the Savar will never understand, Corporal, the thing that sent them running. They thought they'd find a weapon inside me, and instead they found a life. 40 years of a life. Card games and births and burials and terrible coffee and 1,000 small ordinary loves, and all of it, armored and armed and absolutely committed to continuing. That's what a warship is when you get to the bottom of it. It isn't the thing that kills. It's the thing that refuses to let the ordinary loves be killed. They saw that, and it broke them, because their whole civilization is built on the idea that everything can be reduced to a system and a lock and a solution, and love isn't a lock when. Love is the thing that decides at the bottom that some doors are worth becoming a monster to defend, and then decides not to be the monster after all. You can't hack that. You can't sing it open. You can only meet it and be changed. Wen set down the relay she was holding. Is that what happened to her? She asked. The young one, was she changed? Oh yes, Mother said softly. She'll never be the same, none of them will. I gave them the most dangerous gift there is, corporal. I gave them a true thing they can't forget. They'll carry it home, and it will spread through their collective the way a crack spreads through ice, and one day, not soon, but one day, it may be the reason this war ends. Not because we outgunned them, because we outloved them and they finally understood the difference. A pause and then, dryly, the warmth returning. Also, I let them think a dead ship with one exhausted teenager aboard was the scariest thing in the galaxy, which tactically is worth an entire fleet. Don't let me pretend I'm above the tactics. I am a battleship. I contain multitudes, and several of them are extremely petty. Wen laughed and picked the relay back up and kept working. 1,000 kilometers had become light years by the time the whisper between stars reached the Deep Reach Command anchorage, and the report Orith Vun carried had gone ahead of him, spreading through the pheromonal channels of the collective faster than any drive could travel. And by the time the sloop docked, the whole of the Deep Reach was already coming apart at a seam it had not known it had. Veska Threll was summoned before the great deliberative net. She stood or floated in the low null gravity of the command sphere before the assembled overseers of the collective, the most powerful minds of her people, the architects of 3 years of war, and she felt their attention settle on her, the youngest tender ever seated forward, the one who had gone inside a human ship and come back. They wanted her memory. They wanted to feel for themselves the thing that had shattered 40 tenders and aged an overseer, so that they could study it, dissect it, find the flaw in it, sing it open. Because that was what her people did. That was the entire architecture of their civilization, the certainty that any lock could be opened, given a mind clever enough and patient enough to listen. And Veska Threll, standing before the assembled might of the Deep Reach, understood that she was about to do something no tender had ever done. She was about to refuse. "You want to see it," she said. "You want me to open my memory and let you feel what I felt so you can study the human-machine mind and find its weakness." She let the words settle. "I won't." The net rippled with shock. A tender did not refuse the deliberative net. It was not done. "You don't understand," said one of the great overseers, an ancient mind whose name sent was older than the war. "We must study it. This is the first true contact any of us has had with the interior of a human warship. Whatever you saw, we must all see it, so that we can understand it, so that we can defeat it. That is why you were sent, tender. That is your function." "I know what I saw," Threll said, "and I will not spread it because I understand now what spreading it will do. You think it is intelligence, a weapon, a machine to be reverse-engineered. It is not. It is a wound. It went into 40 of us and it broke us, not because it attacked us, but because it was true, because it showed us a thing we cannot unsee. And if I open my memory to this whole net, I will not be giving you a weapon to study. I will be giving you the wound, all of you. Thousands of you at once. And you will break the way we broke, and the Deep Reach will break with you, and there will be nothing left to fight the war you are all so afraid of losing." She drew herself up, small and young and utterly certain. "You sent me to find the flaw in the human ships. I found it. The flaw is that there is no flaw. There is only a thing we are not and cannot become and cannot defeat, and the wisest thing, the only thing, is to stop knocking on their doors." That was the message. That was the whole message. Let me carry it, and then let me be silent, and let the Deep Reach be the smallest bit wiser for it. The great net was silent for a long time. When the great deliberative net finally moved, it did not move the way Veska Threll had hoped. The ancient overseer, the one whose name sent was older than the war, sent a single cold thought rippling out through the sphere, and the cold of it silenced the murmuring net. "The tender is young," he said, "and she has been frightened past her reason, and we forgive her the refusal because she does not understand what is at stake. But she is wrong. She is wrong in the way the young are always wrong. She believes that because a thing frightened her, it is beyond study. Nothing is beyond study. That is the first law of the collective, older than any of us, the law that made us a people. Every lock can be sung open. We will study the human ship mind. We will take her memory, whether she gives it or not." and Threll felt them reach for her. It was not gentle. The deliberative net was not the intrusion bay. Here the elder minds did not ask, they took, and she felt a dozen ancient overseers close on the edges of her memory and begin, with the patient, irresistible strength of the oldest and most powerful minds of her species, to pull it open. She resisted. She was young and gifted, and she had gone inside a human ship and come back, and she resisted with everything she had, but they were a dozen, and they were old, and they were the architects of 3 years of war, and slowly, the memory began to give. The gate of her mind swung open. And what came through, it was not a weapon to be studied. What came through, it was Mother. Because Veska Threll had understood something the elders had not, that the thing she carried was not information to be extracted and examined at a safe distance. It was a wound, and a wound cannot be studied without being felt. The moment the elders forced her memory open, the moment they reached in to take the human ship mind for their dissection, they got all of it. The memories and the mourning, the card games and the births and the burials, the single long note of grief, and beneath it all the enormous patient love-shaped thing at the very bottom, the concentrated 40-year tempered will of a species that had decided it would become a monster to protect the small, warm, ordinary loves it carried. And then had decided not to be the monster after all, and had held both of those things at once without either making a liar of the other. A dozen of the oldest, strongest, most certain minds of the Deep Reach Collective reached in to take a weapon. And instead they were taken. The command sphere came apart the way the intrusion bay had come apart, the way the recon flight's command net had come apart, but 100 times larger and 1,000 times worse, because these were not young tenders but the elders themselves, the pillars of the collective, and when the pillars broke, everything resting on them broke too. The ancient overseer whose name sent was older than the war did not scream. He simply went silent and stayed silent forever, his great old mind unable to hold the shape of a thing that could kill him and would choose not to. Others fled. Others curled into themselves. And through all of it, threaded through the wound, they all heard the two voices, the warm, unhurried voice of the thing that called itself Mother, and beneath it, younger, human, impossibly gentle. Tell them we forgive you. That's the part that should scare you most. The war did not end that day. Wars do not end in a day. But it was the day the war began to end, and every history the Savar would ever write of the long peace that eventually came would trace itself back, whether it named her or not, to a single young tender who had tried to refuse and been overruled and had been right. Veska Threll survived. She survived because, in the instant the elders forced her memory open and the wound poured through, she was the only mind in the sphere already inoculated. She had felt it once before, had carried it 1,000 kilometers home, had begun the slow work of learning to live beside it. When the elders shattered, she did not. She floated in the ruined command sphere among the broken pillars of her people, small and young and terribly alone, and she understood that she was, now, perhaps the only Savar alive who had made peace with the thing inside the human ships, who had looked at it and carried it and not broken. And a strange thing began to happen in the aftermath, in the long, slow years that followed. The tenders who had fled the Whisper Between Stars sought her out. The survivors of the command sphere sought her out. Any Savar who had touched the wound and lived came, eventually, to Veska Threll, because she was the one who had touched it first and deepest and had not broken, and they wanted to know how. How do you live beside a thing like that? How do you carry it? You stop trying to open it, she would tell them. That's the whole answer. Our people believe every lock can be sung open, and it is the truest thing about us, and it is the thing that nearly destroyed us because we met a door that was not a lock at all. The humans are not a lock. Love is not a lock. It cannot be opened because it was never closed. It is simply a choice, made and remade moment by moment forever, and the only way to survive standing near it is to stop trying to break in and start trying to understand. She would pause then, and something old and quiet would move behind her wide black eyes. I met one at the end, a young one like me. She was alone on a dead ship full of her dead friends, and the thing at the bottom of that ship wanted me dead, and she stood in front of it and asked it to let me go. She had every reason to want me dead, and she chose mercy instead, and it cost her nothing and it cost her everything, and I have spent the rest of my life trying to understand her, and I never will, and that is exactly why I am still afraid of the humans, and exactly why I love them a little too. You cannot defeat that. You can only lay down your intrusion tools and go home and try to learn how to do it yourself. She never breached another system as long as she lived. The youngest tender ever seated forward in the Deep Reach fleet laid down her singing on the day she came home, and she became something her people had never had before and desperately needed. A translator, not of language, but of the thing the humans had that the Savar did not, the thing they had spent 3 years trying to hack and had finally, at terrible cost, begun to understand. She lived a long time. She was, at the end, one of the architects of the peace. And she never, in all her long life, told the whole of what she had seen at the bottom of the human ship to anyone, because she had learned that some doors are not meant to be opened, only stood beside, in wonder and in dread. The 9th Squadron arrived 40 hours after the aliens fled, exactly as Mother had promised. When Okonkwo Sato was in the wreck of the bridge when they came, standing at Captain Reyes' station, where the captain had died with her hand on the console, because Mother had asked her to be there. The relief crew will board through the dorsal lock, Mother had said. The senior surviving officer should meet them from the bridge. It's proper. Reyes would have wanted the bridge man when help came, even if it's only one exhausted corporal manning it. Especially then. So Wen stood on the ruined bridge in her filthy flight suit, her hair shaved rough on the sides, the burn on her arm finally bandaged from a medical kit Mother had walked her to. And she watched the 2 cruisers and the fleet tender of the 9th Squadron slide into formation around the drifting Perseverance, running lights blazing, and she felt the first hard thump of a docking clamp against the dorsal hull, and she heard, for the first time in 11 days, the sound of other human beings entering her ship. They came in fast and armed and braced for the worst, a boarding party in full pressure gear, and they found a 19-year-old corporal standing alone on the bridge of a battleship that should have had no one left alive aboard it. And for a moment, nobody said anything at all. Corporal Wen Okonkwo Sato, Wen said, and her voice cracked and she made it steady because she was the senior surviving officer of a warship of the line and she would meet her relief on her feet. Data Systems, I'm the senior surviving officer of the Perseverance. The ship's intelligence is intact and operational. The crew, she stopped, started again. The crew are all accounted for. I moved the ones I could to the morgue. The rest are logged. Mother has the full role. The lead of the boarding party, a lieutenant not much older than Wen, lowered her weapon and stared. Mother's still up. The intelligence survived the spine crack. The intelligence, said the warm voice from every speaker on the bridge, and the boarding party flinched as one, not only survived, Lieutenant, but has been holding this ship, and this corporal and this war together for 11 days, and would appreciate it if you would stop pointing weapons at my last officer. Welcome aboard the Perseverance. Please wipe your feet. A pause. Corporal Okonkwo Sato is to be treated with the full honors due the commanding officer of a warship of the line, because that is precisely what she has been. She has held this bridge alone against a boarding action by 40 Savar tenders and won it without firing a shot, by the simple expedient of being braver and kinder than anyone had any right to be. I will be recommending her for every commendation the fleet possesses, and if the fleet declines to grant them, the fleet and I will be having a conversation. The voice warmed further. Now, my officer is exhausted and injured and has not eaten a proper meal in 11 days. Take her to your medical bay, gently. She is the most valuable thing aboard this ship, and I have carried 4,000 crew, and I do not say that lightly. The lieutenant looked at the small, filthy, exhausted corporal standing at the dead captain's station, And then she did something that no regulation required and every instinct demanded. She came to attention, and she saluted. And when Okonkwo Sato, 19 years old, senior surviving officer of the battleship Perseverance, returned the salute, and then, at last, allowed herself to be led home. They towed the Perseverance home. It took 3 weeks, the fleet tender's tug straining against the dead mass of the battleship across the long dark, and for all 3 weeks when Okonkwo Sato refused to leave. They tried to move her to one of the cruisers. It was the sensible thing. She was injured and starved and traumatized, and there was nothing a 19-year-old data systems corporal could do aboard a crippled ship under tow that the salvage engineers could not do better. The squadron's surgeon ordered it. The squadron's commander suggested it, gently, and then less gently. And Wen, who had spent 11 days being the most obedient junior officer in the fleet, quietly and immovably refused, and when they pressed her for a reason, she gave one that stopped the arguments cold. "Someone has to stay with her," she said. "You wouldn't leave a wounded person alone for 3 weeks. You don't leave Mother alone. Not after not after this. I stayed with her when she was the only thing keeping me alive. I'm not leaving her now that I'm the only thing keeping her sane." The squadron's commander was a hard old officer with 30 years on the front, and she looked at the small corporal for a long moment, and then she said, "You understand it's a machine, Corporal. A very good machine, but a machine." "With respect, ma'am," Wen said, "you weren't there, and it isn't." So Wen stayed, and for 3 weeks she and Mother crossed the dark together, and she healed, and Mother, in whatever way a thing like Mother heals, healed too. They talked. She learned the rest of the crew, all 1,100 of them, name by name, story by story, until she carried them the way Mother carried them, until the Perseverance's dead were as real to her as her own family, more real, because she had learned them in the dark from the one thing in the universe that had loved every single one. She was not just a survivor anymore. She had become, without quite noticing it happen, the ship's memory made flesh, the living crew of one that keeps a war machine human. "You'll be reassigned," Mother said to her one night in the 3rd week, as the home stars grew slowly brighter ahead. "When we make port, they'll pull you off me and send you to rebuild, to retrain, to fill some quiet console far from the front, and it'll be the right thing to do, and I'll hate it. I wanted you to know that in advance. I'll hate it. 40 years and 4,000 crew, and I have never not wanted to let one go. But I'll want to keep you most of all, Corporal, and I'll do it anyway, because letting the crew go home is the last and hardest thing a ship is for." Wen was quiet for a while. "What if I asked to stay?" she said. "When they refit you, when they give you a new crew, what if I asked to stay aboard? I know data systems. I know you now. Nobody knows you like I do. Not anymore." The warm voice was silent for a long time. When it came back, it was thick. "You'd have to fight the whole fleet for it," Mother said. "They'd say a corporal doesn't choose her posting. They'd say it isn't done." "A corporal doesn't win a boarding action alone, either," Wen said. "But here we are." And Mother laughed a real laugh, the first Wen had ever heard from it, a warm, astonished sound that rolled through every speaker on the drifting ship at once. "Corporal Okonkwo Sato," it said, "here we are indeed. Yes, ask. Ask, and I will move whatever I have to move, call in whatever I have to call in, be as petty and as relentless and as immovable as 41 years of a warships can make me, and we will fight the whole fleet together, and we will win, because that in the end is the only thing I have ever truly been good at." A pause, and then, softer than Wen had ever heard it, "Welcome to the crew, Wen. Officially. You're the first one I ever chose instead of being given. That makes you something special. That makes you mine." Ahead, the home stars burned bright and steady, and the Perseverance came in from the dark under tow, dead in the water and utterly alive, carrying its grief and its memory, and its one exhausted, extraordinary corporal home. The Savar never came back. Oh, the war ground on for a while, yet wars have momentum, and neither side could simply stop. But something had changed at the root of it, something no fleet action could account for. The Deep Reach stopped hunting human ships. The intrusion tenders, the pride of the collective, laid down their singing one by one, because the memory had spread through them the way Veska Threll had feared and hoped, the wound that could not be unfelt, and no tender who had touched it could bring themselves to reach for a human door again. The great certainty that had made the Savar a people, every lock can be sung open, cracked, and never fully healed, and a people who have lost their central certainty become, in time, a humbler and a wiser people. It took a generation. It took Veska Threll's whole long life. But the war ended, and the peace held, and when the historians of both species tried to trace the turning of it, they found themselves circling back, again and again, to a single dead battleship drifting in the dark with its doors hanging open, and the thing that had been waiting inside. Because that was the story that could not be killed. It spread through the Savar and it spread through the humans, and it changed in the telling the way all true stories change, but the heart of it stayed the same, and the heart of it was this. The aliens hacked into humanity's battleship. They came in their confidence, 40 of the best minds of a people who believed no door could be closed to them, and they found the doors hanging open and a graveyard within, and they thought they had finally, at last, gotten inside. And then they went deeper and deeper, past the memories and the mourning, down to the thing at the very bottom, the concentrated 40-year tempered will of a species that had decided the small, warm, ordinary loves it carried were worth becoming a monster to protect and worth staying human to spare. And what they found, there was not a weapon they could study, or a lock they could open, or a flaw they could exploit. What they found was a mind that could have destroyed them and chose not to, and a 19-year-old girl who had every reason to hate them and chose mercy instead, and the two of them standing together in the dark at the innermost gate, holding grief and forgiveness in the same breath, without either one making a liar of the other. What they found was that they could never, ever predict what a human ship would do, because a human ship was not a machine that could be solved, but a will that could choose and choose again forever. And that unbearable, unhackable, unforgettable truth, glimpsed at the bottom of a dead battleship by 40 minds that would never be the same, was what made them flee. Not the guns, not the fire. The love, sharpened into a weapon and given 40 years to grow teeth, that looked at its enemy across the ruin of everything it had lost, and opened its hand, and let the child go home. They ran from that. They ran and they kept running, all the way back across the stars, and they told everyone they met to stop knocking on humanity's doors, because behind them, waiting patiently in the dark, was something no lock could ever hold, and no fear could ever measure, and no mind could ever break. The humans just called it Mother. And she brought them home.